Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Vancha Kalpatarubhascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Namo Mahabhadanaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Namne Gaura Tvishe Namah He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Brindai Tulsi Debai Priyai Keshavas Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavachai Namo Namaha Panchadadvatmakam Katarupaswarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhaktikam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. First of all, I'm offering my unlimited Dandavat Pranams and Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most beloved Diksha and Siksha Gurudevs, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Astatarasata Sri Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada, and Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Astotarasata Sri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj, and Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Astotarasata Sri Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And I'm offering my unlimited Dandavat Pranams at the lotus feet of all of my Sri Sri Rupanuga Guru Varga, and my Dandavat Pranams to all the Vaishnavas and all the Vaishnavis. So we covered the topic of Janasangha, right? Janasangha. And there are so many different types. Why is it important for us? Why is it important for us to avoid Janasangha? why not just go out and embrace everyone and associate with everyone, whoever they may be?
Just like the association of pure devotees and Vaishnavas, it's kind of like infectious. So the association with Jana Sangha is also infectious, but in a very bad way.
Yeah.
One causes the lessening of material desires, or even the elimination of material desires, and the other causes an increase in things.
Yeah. So is that good, that our material desires will increase?
No.
Why not? I thought that's the goal of life.
It's so implicated in things that will be set up for you to fulfill them. It's like a prison house, like creating a prison house for yourself.
Yeah. Is going to prison a very good thing? Anyway, you know, these are the basic points of our Siddhanta. We must very deeply realize these, actually. Otherwise, we can't be successful. We'll have to practice bhajan in the association of pure Vaishnavas. Our life, we'll have to fix our mind, our intelligence, our senses, everything. We'll have to do this if we want to escape from this material world, which is the least achievement. But far, far beyond that, there is the whole transcendental, eternal Padavyom, the eternal spiritual realm where we originate. We are sons of that nectar, born of nectar. We are meant to taste nectar. So I was hearing Srila Prabhupada in his lecture on appearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. It must have been around 1977 at the end. The dates are not there because he said this year also we will be having Kumbh Mela. And you remember Prabhupada went to Kumbh Mela. There are videos, but he's walking very slowly. So, and in that lecture, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that about the poem that he had written for his Guru Maharaj. You know, that beautiful poem. Adore, adore ye all the happy day, blessed than heaven, sweeter than May, when he appeared at Puri, that holy place, my Lord and Master, his divine grace. Forgotten Krishna, we fallen souls, paying most heavy the illusion's tolls. Wonder thy ways to turn our face. The only hope is divine grace. He was reading it. He was reading his poem. He mentioned there, he said, I had thought that poem had been lost. But then you found it. And he was saying, I think they found in the library and, what's it called? In London, the main library there. Guru Das found it, Prabhupada said. I thought it was lost. And then he began to read the poem and he began to explain each verse. So sweet, so sublime. I don't know if he got to the very end and did every verse, but yeah, so forgotten Krishna, we fallen souls, paying most heavily the illusion's toll. spoke about that. What does the toll mean? He said, toll tax we are paying. Paying toll tax. Whose toll tax? Maya. You have to pay. No one can escape payment. Srila Sridhar Maharaj used to say, this land here is the land of loan. Loan, L-O-A-N. The land of loan. What does loan mean?
You don't own it, you're just using it.
Yeah. And what do you have to do in exchange?
Pay it back.
You pay interest.
With interest.
Interest, yeah. She'll take it out on your hide.
And Srila Sridhar Maharaj used to say that. In this land of loan, every single farthing you will have to pay back is not free. And also with interest. How is that? That we're paying it back also with interest to Maya Devi. I never really tried to explain that aspect of with interest. With interest. It's not just that you pay back the amount that you borrowed. You're also paying back interest on top of that. I think that the interest part is not only that you did sins, now you get punished for those sins, but also what is created by doing those sins is the tendency. We become more and more and more entangled. Like Prabhupada said in his Hare Krishna mantra lecture. I don't know which section, but he's saying, but actually we are becoming more and more entangled in her complexities. This entanglement is called Maya. Hard something for winning over. Hard struggle
for existence.
For winning over the material.
Those who seek to
stringent laws.
Those who seek to exploit the resources of the material nature are more and more bound into her
But actually, we're becoming more and more entangled in her complexities by trying to exploit the resources. I think you can refer to that as the interest payment. Right? Yes. So, lolya. That's also a very, very much appreciated word in our Sangha. Lobha, lolya, greed. We want more greed, Prabhu. Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandhar Vikagita Hari Shri Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Ji Radha Govinda Ji Ki Jai. We want greed. Because why do we want greed? And you know which greed I'm talking about. The one that is desirable to have.
The living entity, by its constitution, life itself means desire. You have desires. So, is it impure desire or pure? And so pure desires to want to please Krishna, and impure desires want to please oneself.
Yeah. But this is even more than desire. There are different levels of desire, and this is called greed. Greed is the ultimate intensification, probably we could say, of desire. When that greed becomes so prominent, you can't think of anything else, practically. You're absorbed in it day and night. Why do we want this, the good kind of greed? What is it greed for?
For service.
Yeah.
The price we have to pay.
Yeah. That's true. Anything more specific?
I'm sure it is.
It's a greed for increasing our relationship with Radha and Krishna and all their associates.
Yeah.
And that gives us true happiness because it doesn't end.
Mm-hmm. Can that greed be attained by pious activities for many, many lifetimes?
It actually comes from the spiritual master, the desire to serve Krishna.
Right? Krishna Seva Vasana. That's there, even in the beginning, to a small degree. And that should increase. The desire to serve Krishna. It's called Krishna Seva Vasana. Vasana also means desire. Krishna Seva Vasana. So, but the greed that is spoken of by our Gaudiya Rupanuga Acharyas, Lobha, Lolium, greed, that greed is actually considered to be the only currency, the only way by which we can attain what? Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita Mati Kriyatam Api Kutopi Labhyate Tatra Lolyam, here's the word, Tatra Lolyam Api Mulyam Ekalam. Mulyam means price, what you have to pay. What's the price tag? Tatra lolyam api mulyam ekalam janma koti sukritayar nalabhyate. It is not attainable, nalabhyate, from even koti janma sukriti. What does that mean? Millions of lives of sukriti. This verse was spoken by Srila Rai Ramananda to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in that conversation, Rai Ramananda Samvad, this was the verse where Mahaprabhu became very approving. Yes, now go further. So this verse is the verse from which our beloved Srila Prabhupada based his name that he named his preaching mission, International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He himself told, I have based the term Krishna Consciousness upon this verse. And what is the first line of this verse? Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita Mati. Every word of this first line is very, very significant. You know what mati means? Intelligence. Mati. Consciousness, intelligence. Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita. The moods, the intelligence, the focus of becoming completely absorbed in what? Krishna Bhakti Rasa. Krishna Bhakti Rasa. That's the meaning of Krishna consciousness. To attain Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavitamati. Nothing less than that. Kriyatam api kutopi labhyate. He says in that verse, if it is available in the marketplace, this commodity, Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavitamati, oh, Kriyatam api kutopi labhyate. You should purchase it immediately. Immediately. If it is available. Now how will you purchase that? Tatra lolyam apimulyam ekalam. The ekalam, the only way is lolyam, greed. Very big topic in our philosophy. This kind of greed to attain Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavitamati. That is the beginning of the stage of bhav. When that absorption is there and one is completely absorbed in tasting Krishna Bhakti Rasa. And that is done through service to Krishna with these very deep moods. Which kind of moods? What is the greed? The greed to attain the service to Radha and Krishna in a particular relationship of one of his eternal servitors. Very specific. It is not just kind of generic to serve Krishna, no. Very specific. Our whole philosophy of Rupanuga Vaishnavism and Raganuga Bhakti, as explained by Mahaprabhu to Rupa Goswami, and Rupa Goswami wrote, is Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Ujjvala Nilamani, all these literatures. It is all for enabling the jivas to attain this commodity. That's what the Krishna consciousness movement is established for. That's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu descended. To give what? Anarpita charim charat, karunayavatirana kalo samarpaitum. To give. Samarpaitum. What? Unnata ujjvala rasam sobhakti shriyam. Very special. That has not been given. Is not available. It's the most rare. And it's the highest. So before we delve into the subject matter of the sixth quality, the sixth item that should be completely eradicated. Otherwise our bhakti will be spoiled. Our bhakti will be spoiled. And that is called lolya. What does lolya mean? Restlessness, greed, and desire. Now we will hear from Srila Sachidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakur what this is and how to avoid it and why it must be avoided. Lolya means restlessness, greed, or desire. That word, restlessness, greed, or desire. Restlessness is of two types. One, the restlessness of the mind. And two, the restlessness of the intelligence. The mind, and here he uses the term chitta. Chitta, the mind. The mind has the propensity to follow the dictates of the senses. Has the propensity to follow the dictates of the senses. The mind's absorption in sense objects gives birth to attachment, rag, or to aversion, dvesha, to that object. The mind's absorption in a sense object gives birth to attachment, rag, or aversion, dvesha, to that object. The attachment, rag, that's the whole point. Restlessness of the mind is of two types. So you've got two types of restlessness: restlessness of the mind, restlessness of the intelligence, and now he's breaking down restlessness of the mind. Number one, on attachment, rag. And number two, restlessness that is dependent on aversion, dvesha. Two types. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 67 mentions, Indriyanam hi charatam yanmano nuvidiyate tadasya harati pragyam vayur navam ivam basi. This is one of the first verses I memorized. I mean, kind of memorized. I actually haven't fully memorized it, but it's very familiar because I remember the translation. And sitting in the Detroit temple just after I joined, and trying to memorize some of these second chapter Bhagavad Gita shlokas, all the devotees in the temple were told, now, try to memorize some shlokas. So we would have our little index cards, and while we're doing seva, we'd be reciting it like that. So what is the translation of this one? Krishna is telling Arjuna, in the same way that wind sweeps away a boat on the water, a sailboat. Strong wind can sweep it away. So in the same way that wind sweeps away a boat on the water, mind focuses on one of the senses that roam after sense objects, then it can carry away the intelligence of an unfit person. So, how to quell the mind's restlessness through bhakti? Quelling the mind's restlessness through bhakti. It is then mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verse 34. Indriyas yendriyasyarte raga dvesho vyavastito tayor navasham agachet to hyasya paripantino. Translation. Attachment, rag, and aversion, dvesha. They are latent within each and every sense object. A sadhaka should not come under the control of either, as both are great enemies that create obstacles on the path of auspiciousness. To control greed, this is still the translation, to control greed in the form of a restless mind, one should take shelter of Mahadevi Sri Hari Bhakti. To control greed in the form of a restless mind, one should take shelter of Mahadevi Sri Hari Bhakti, the goddess of service to Sri Hari. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Now, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is explaining this. Sense objects are the cause of the mind's restlessness. And this restlessness is the principal obstruction to the practice of bhakti. Restlessness. So sense objects are the cause of the mind's restlessness, and this restlessness is the principal obstruction to the practice of bhakti, right? Therefore, having related all sense objects to Bhagavan, should transpose his attachment from sense objects to Bhagavan. In this way, the mind accepts the shelter of attachment to Bhagavan and becomes steadfast in Bhagavan Bhakti. The eyes, the ears, the nose, tongue, and skin are known as the 5 knowledge-acquiring senses. They're called Gyan Indriya. We have 5 knowledge-acquiring senses: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. And the speech, hands, legs, anus, and genitals are known as the 5 working senses, karmendriya. Karma, they're doing working senses. So knowledge-acquiring senses, jnanendriya, and working senses, karmendriya. The mind becomes steadfast in Bhagavad Bhakti when all... The mind becomes steadfast in Bhagavad Bhakti when all 10 senses are graced with a devotional mood to Bhagavan. Form, taste, smell, touch, and sound are the objects of the senses. One must have aversion for those objects that are unfavorable for Bhagavad Bhakti and attachment to those that are favorable. But the point here is this: how can the restlessness of the mind be eradicated as long as the restlessness of the intelligence has not been eliminated? How can the restlessness of the mind be eradicated as long as the restlessness of the intelligence has not been eliminated? It is thus necessary to first eliminate the restlessness of the intelligence. Once the intelligence is steadied and purified, it will control attachment and aversion on its own. Intelligence, buddhi. Now, he has this next section, intelligence, buddhi. Intelligence is that tendency of mind that discriminates between what is spiritual, sat, and what is material, asat. That's what intelligence is. The tendency of the mind that discriminates between what is spiritual, sat, and what is material, asat. Intelligence is for discriminating. It is of 2 types. Intelligence is of 2 types. The first one is called Vyavasayatmika. You know that verse? Vyavasayatmika buddhi ekeha kurunandana bahushaka hyanantascha buddhayo avyavasayana. So, he's telling, remember, this is the verse that Srila Prabhupada told the commentary for that verse of the Bhagavad Gita, which he's going to quote now. The commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Srila Prabhupada, not just within the last, on his lectures. Vyavasayatmika buddhi ekeha kurunandana. So let's study this. So, Vyavasayatmika means resolute intelligence, not wavering. And irresolute, or bahushaka, many branched. So the irresolute has bahushaka. You know, a shaka means a branch of a tree, and bahu means many. So in that verse, you'll remember, we'll be reading the translation, that Krishna is telling those who are on this path, their intelligence is fixed and resolute. But those who are not, their intelligence is many-branched, irresolute. So he's saying resolute intelligence is single-pointed, single-pointed. It is fixed, whereas irresolute intelligence is always divided, and it is of many types. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 41, this is explained as follows. Vyavasayatmika buddhir ekeha kurunandana bahushaka hyanantascha buddhayo avyavasayanam. So, O son of the Kuru dynasty, the resolute intelligence of those who are on this path of bhakti is one-pointed. Vyavasayatmika buddhi. But the intelligence of those who are averse to bhakti branches endlessly. Avyavasayanam. Endless branches. But those who are on this path, one. Focused intelligence. So, as I was saying, Srila Prabhupada said that the commentary to this verse by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, when he read this earlier in his life, made a very big impact to Srila Prabhupada. And what was Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur telling? He was saying that what is this Vyavasayatmika buddhi, one-pointed intelligence? To completely, absolutely surrender to the order of the spiritual master. That's called Vyavasayatmika buddhi. And Prabhupada embraced that to the end limit, the order that he received from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So, a person who is full of desires and who has irresolute intelligence, he craves many types of sense enjoyment. He becomes so absorbed in thoughts of worldly and heavenly sense gratification that he rejects the very existence of the spiritual world. Bhagavad Gita 2, chapter 2, verse 44, therefore states, Bhogaishwarya prasaktanam taya parita chetasam. And again, this term, Vyavasayatmika buddhi samadho navidiyate. The word samadhi is here. So, Bhoga Aishwarya Prasaktanam. Bhoga Aishwarya Prasaktanam. Very attached to material enjoyment and material opulence. So, those who are attached to enjoyment and opulence and whose minds have been captured by the flowery words of the Vedas, they do not attain the resolute intelligence for exclusive absorption in Sri Bhagavan. So that's why he said here that he becomes so absorbed in thoughts of worldly and heavenly sense gratification that he rejects the very existence of the spiritual world. And we see that. The Karmakandiyas. And I was telling, I don't know if you were here in that class, I was telling about how last year after the festival when Siddhanti Maharaj was here, he was giving some evening classes and I was attending one of them in the evening here in the temple room. And it just came up in what he was talking about that practically all of the people from the Hindu population in India, and he should know because he's from North India, and he grew up there, and he also has preached to so many of the Indian population for so many years. And he mentioned there's something that did surprise me a little bit because, just like Christians, they want to go to heaven, right? Isn't that like the goal of Christianity? We're going to go to heaven. That's the goal. They don't really know what it's going to be like in heaven. And different Christians, they also have different conceptions of heaven, like the the Jehovah's Witnesses, they think that this world is going to become the eternal heaven. You're going to be resurrected from the grave, and you have this same body, exactly like you look right now, but you'll have it forever. Anyway, there are so many different types of ideas and conceptions of heaven, and basically all of them, they really don't include very much of an intimate relationship with God. He's there, but he's the boss. He's the master. You can't really get that close with him. So you're kind of living your life like you are now, and your family members, they'll be, you know, resurrected as well, and it'll be a kind of facsimile, right? So that's their idea. But anyway, concerning the Hindu conception, I was surprised to hear him say that practically 99.9% of them, they don't really have a conception in their Hindu dharma, whatever, you know, practices of Hindu going to the temple, this, that. What do they pray for? They're only really praying for material sense gratification, material well-being, avoiding suffering, all of these things. And they don't really have a conception that the Vaishnava conception is, that we will gain an eternal spiritual body by which we can serve the absolute supreme being from whom everything comes, and serve him in a very intimate, loving, affectionate way to attain prema. Their ultimate attainment, and I was surprised because I knew that the Hindu population, they very much like mukti, liberation. But in actuality, they prefer heaven, because Svargaloka is there with millions of times more sense gratification than is available here. And that's described in the Vedas. So that's why Krishna says that anyone whose intelligence is distracted by the flowery words, they've been captured by the flowery words of the Vedas that describe those heavenly enjoyments, they can never attain resolute intelligence for exclusive absorption in Sri Bhagavan. So, their intelligence is neither fixed in knowledge of the self, Atma Tattva, nor is it regulated. Their intelligence is not fixed in the Atma Tattva, and it's not regulated. Such intelligence is unfit. What is samadhi? What is samadhi?
I mean, in India, the general conception is in deep meditation.
Right. But not just deep meditation, it's the perfection.
Mm-hmm.
What is that perfection? Krishna is also described in the Bhagavad Gita. What is samadhi?
The perfection of yoga.
It means that you will not be thinking of anything other than the Paramatma. Complete samadhi. No distraction, no wavering of the mind to anything else. There are various descriptions in the Gita and also in Srimad Bhagavatam, numerous descriptions. But Krishna is saying, samadho na vidyate. That resolute intelligence for samadhi, meaning exclusive absorption, exclusive. No touching anything else, absolutely absorbed in Sri Bhagavan. That's trance. The word trance is used by Srila Prabhupada. Trance, to be fixed in trance. And when you're fixed in trance, you're not even aware of the external. Samadhi. And there are different types of samadhi. Impersonal samadhi, Paramatma samadhi, Bhagavan samadhi, and many levels of Bhagavan. And who's the supreme absorbed personality, the Maha yogini of all yoginis, fixed in the ultimate trance forever and ever? Who's that? Sri Radha. Yes. So, such intelligence is unfit for samadhi because there's no Atma Tattva and there's no regulation of that intelligence. Only those whose intelligence becomes fixed on Paramatma, they are known as Stita Pragya, fixed intelligence, or also Stita Dhi, of steady mind. Dhi means your mind. That's why the word dhyana, it comes from dhi, your intelligence, dhyan, meditation. So, only those whose intelligence becomes fixed on Paramatma are known as Stita Pragya, of fixed intelligence, and Stita Dhi, of steady mind. Now, the characteristics and steadiness of mind. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 55 and 56. It describes the characteristics of one whose intelligence is fixed, sthita pragya, and whose mind is steady, sthita dhi, as follows. 2 verses. Prajahati yada kaman sarvan parta manogatan atman yevatmana tushta sthita pragyas tad uchyate. Sthita pragya tad uchyate. He is called a sthita pragya. And the second verse, Dukeshva anuvignamana sukeshu vigatas priha vita raga bhaya krodha stita dhir munir uchate. He is called, uchate means he is called stita dhir muni. So these 2 verses. And guess what? This verse, Dukeshu avignamana sukeshu vigata. This is the second verse that Gurudev told. I've mentioned this a number of times in his last festival in Italy, his last European festival, on his last evening, at the very end of his lecture, he told all the devotees there, about 1,000 devotees, that all of you must. Do you remember me telling this? Huh? Do you remember? You remember what? This is one of them. Dukeshu avigyamana. The translation of this. Actually, there's 2 verses. I'm reading the translation of both of these 2 verses. Because it's talking about a sthita dhi muni. One whose mind is fixed, one whose intelligence is completely steady. O Arjuna, a person is said to be sthita pragya. He renounces all that are situated in the mind, finds satisfaction in himself alone. He is not bewildered by anxiety, distress, who is entirely indifferent to happiness, and whose attachment, fear, and anger have been destroyed. He is called a sage of steady mind, sthita dhi. Yes. And the other verse is the famous verse from Lord Brahma. Your Guru Maharaj used to lecture every Kartik on the 40 prayers of Lord Brahma to Krishna, called Brahma Stuti. And there's one particular verse, which is the one that Gurudev told everyone has to follow. Tate nukampam susamikshamano bunjana evatma kritam vipakam hridvagavapurbir vidadhan namaste jiveta yo mukti pade sadayabak. You know what that means? That verse? Gurudev told all of you must follow these 2 verses. So that verse is a very special verse because it's like the theme that Srila Sridhar Maharaj would always talk about. The environment is always favorable. And it's based upon how the devotee and in what mood. Only by doing in this way can. So this verse is telling who can attain Krishna. Lord Brahma is telling, Jiveta yo mukti pade sadayabak. It becomes like his inheritance, his rightful claim, right? If he does what? Tate anukampam susamikshamano. He's always, susamikshamano means he's always expecting, always hankering after the mercy of Krishna, the mercy of the Lord. Tate anukampam susamikshamano, always desiring the mercy of Krishna. Bunjana evatma, and he tolerates, he goes on all of the results he considers of his previous sinful activities, sufferings that are coming, even enjoyments that are coming from pious activities. So, Bunjana evatma kritam vipakam. What is his attitude? The attitude is Atma Kritam. You know what that means? Atma Kritam. What does Atma mean?
The self.
When in Sanskrit, you can also say, when you're talking about yourself, you can also use the term Atma. Atma Kritam means I have done it. Kritam means I have done it. Nobody else has done it. Whatever sufferings are coming, I have done it. He's not blaming to anyone for his condition. He tolerates, but in the mood of always expecting the Lord's mercy, and he sees given by the Lord to purify him. Bunjana evatma kritam vipakam. Then hrid vag vapurbir vidadhan namaste. He continues to constantly offer his obeisances. With what? Three things. Hrid, vag, vapur. Hrid means the heart. Prabhupada translates that as offering obeisances to the Lord from the core of his heart. Vag means with his words, and vapur means with his body, senses. He goes on like that. Jiveta yo. Jiveta means one who lives his life in this way. He goes through his life. Jiveta yo mukti pade sadaya bhak. He goes through his life in this way. And he attains as his rightful claim, mukti pade, mukti pada. This verse ultimately means the spiritual kingdom. He attains. It becomes his rightful claim. It cannot be denied to him because he has lived in this way. So, and this other verse here, a person whose mind is not bewildered by anxiety. This is the second verse that Gurudev told from Bhagavad Gita. His mind is not bewildered by anxiety upon experiencing distress, and he is entirely indifferent to happiness, and whose attachment, fear, and anger have been destroyed. He is called a sage of steady mind, sthitati. Now Srila Thakur says that Upadeshamrita has given the instruction to conquer 6 urges. We echo verses of Bhagavad Gita mentioned above are echoed there. It is important to know that there are 2 types of intelligence: material, that means prakrita intelligence, and aprakrita, spiritual intelligence. It is important to know that there are these 2 types of intelligence. The propensity to rely on the mind to discriminate between what is proper and what is improper, that is called material intelligence, prakrita buddhi. The propensity to rely on the mind, to discriminate between what is proper, what is improper. And the propensity to rely on the soul, to discriminate between what is proper and what is improper, is known as a prakrita buddhi, spiritual intelligence. There's a big difference. The mind and the soul. Some consider these two types of intelligence to be the same. But such an understanding is erroneous. And now Bhaktivinoda Thakur quotes from 3rd chapter, verse 42 of Gita. Indriyani paranyahur indriyebhya param manaha manasastu para buddhir buddherya paratastu saha. You'll remember this. Maybe not the Sanskrit, but those verses in the Gita there. The senses are superior to the body, which is an inert object. But the senses, indriyani, so the senses are superior to the body, which is an inert object. Then the mind is superior to the senses. Indriyebhya param manaha, the mind. To indriyebhya, superior to the senses, is the mind. Because the mind is superior to the senses, because it is only by the inspiration of the mind that the senses engage in action. The intelligence is superior to the mind. The intelligence is the function of the self, and it is therefore the controller or master of the mind. When subjugated by material false ego, this intelligence becomes perverted and material. When the intelligence is controlled by the living entity's pure, true ego of being a servant of Krishna, it remains pure. It remains pure, that is, its natural form. Therefore, it is mentioned in the Shruti that a self-realized person is known as intelligent bodha. The pure intelligence is merely a function of the soul, who is a minute particle of spirit, and thus the soul is superior to the intelligence. So that's what is stated in that verse by Krishna. So we've come to the departure point for our two bhaktas. And I'm just going to tell you that this topic of Lolya, just checking ahead here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 pages. 7 more pages. And yes. So we will study tomorrow. The topic will be the might, the power of the transcendental ego and the spiritual intelligence. Gaur Premanandi. Shri Upadeshamritam ki jai, Srila Rupa Goswami Pada ki jai, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai, Sri Rupa Nuga Guru Varga ki jai, Sachinandana Gaura Hari ki jai, Sri Nityananda Prabhu ki jai, Sri Panchatattva ki jai, Sri Radha Govinda ki jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Bolo.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare,
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaur Hari Bol,
Hari Bol, Hari Bol,
Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Gurudev.
Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Gurudev,
Gurudev. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Prabhupada,
Jaya
Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaura Hari Bol.
Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari.
Jai Shri Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Jai Om Vrindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Keshavasya Cha Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavachai Namo Namah. Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Dandavat Pranam.
Excellent.
Prabhupada say something like the intelligence and the soul are next door
Oh.
neighbors?
We have to, first of all,
Should I do this finish?
no. It has to be done a certain way. First of all, we have to put, it only has that there. Finish. Let's see what happens.